For the first time in modern history, 7 of the most powerful men in the world were arrested, not in war zones, not in boardrooms, but in their silk robes, in hotel rooms, in Africa. AM, March 15th. The streets of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital were unusually quiet, but beneath the silence, something was happening that would shake the world to its core. Coordinated teams of Burkina Faso's elite special forces moved through hotel hallways, armed not just with weapons, but with court warrants, intelligence dossiers, and a mission. Knock, silence, boom, arrest. That rhythm played out 7 times, in 7 different hotels across the city, all within 5 minutes. Viktor Petrov, CEO of Goldmax Corporation, the world's largest gold producer, was the first to go down. His personal guards were neutralized before they could even unzip their tactical vests. Petrov opened his door half asleep, expecting room service. Instead, he got handcuffs. "You're under arrest," the officer said, "for crimes against the Republic and the people." Hours later, images would begin to leak. Petrov in his designer pajamas, Jean-Claude Dubois of Western Gold Mining caught on the tarmac beside his private jet, Michael Thompson of Pacific Resources handcuffed beside, an open laptop mid-transfer of assets. The headlines would scream, "Africa strikes back. Burkina Faso detonates the mining system." But behind this choreographed takedown, there was only one name: Ibrahim Traoré. The 35-year-old interim president, a former military captain turned revolutionary leader, had spent months in silence, building the case, watching, documenting, preparing. And when he struck, it wasn't just about arrests, it was about reckoning. Traoré's rise had shocked many. He wasn't backed by Western powers. He didn't come from wealth. He came from the red dust of the Sahel, from a family of farmers, from a region where children coughed blood near gold mines, while Europe bathed in stolen glitter. He had watched as over $500 billion in gold was extracted from Burkina Faso over the last 50 years, and less than 2% ever made it to the national budget. "The West gave us lectures on democracy," he once said in a speech, "but never once on justice." 6 months before the arrests, Traoré ordered a full audit of all foreign mining operations in the country. But this wasn't a public inquiry. It was covert, surgical, and intelligent. He deployed drones to fly over mining zones. He placed undercover agents within corporate sites, disguised as drivers, cooks, cleaners. He recruited data analysts from neighboring universities and built a war room at the Ministry of Justice. The findings? Catastrophic. Goldmax in 2020 reported producing 1.2 tons of gold, but drone scans showed 9 tons leaving their facilities per month. Western Gold Mining listed community projects in their annual CSR report, but local villagers said they'd never seen a single road paved, a school built, or a clinic opened. Pacific Resources listed 3,000 local jobs. Traoré's team found only 300 on payroll. The rest? Children, some as young as 10. At one meeting, Traoré stood before his closest advisors, his fist clenched. "They lie in their reports," he said, "but the soil doesn't lie, the drones don't lie, the people's bones don't lie." The room fell silent. He then opened a folder marked confidential. Inside were the names of foreign executives, copies of fake invoices, bribery contracts, and one thing no one expected: signed letters between mining CEOs and previous government officials agreeing to illegal tax cuts in exchange for millions in offshore accounts. The final trigger came from a hidden microphone planted in the boardroom of Goldmax's regional office. The CEO was overheard saying, "Give the minister his $5 million and we'll get the new license. These people? They'll dance for dollars like they always do." When Traoré heard those words, he didn't blink. He didn't yell. He simply said, "Operation Sunrise begins in 30 days." The arrests were just the beginning. In the 24 hours that followed, Traoré's government froze over $2 billion in corporate bank accounts across West Africa. Mining sites were seized. All airspace over Burkina Faso was closed. For the first time, foreign powers couldn't escape. The Western media erupted. CNN called it an authoritarian crackdown. Reuters questioned the legality. The EU called for an emergency meeting. But back in Ouagadougou, the people were dancing in the streets. Traoré, Traoré, Traoré. Villagers brought bags of dust from old mining zones, singing, "This dust fed their banks. Now it will build our schools." Children wore shirts printed with the words, "Our gold is ours." And yet, Traoré didn't smile. Not yet. He knew the hardest part wasn't arresting CEOs, it was proving that they'd stolen not just gold, but futures. 10 days later, he addressed the nation. Standing at the National Assembly, he held up a thick, black binder. "This is not a war against companies," he said. "It is a war against criminal systems dressed in ties and protected by Western laws. We invited them here as partners. They became looters. They took our land, our labor, our light, but no more. From this day on, exploitation in Burkina Faso is a crime against the nation." That same night, at the Bobo Dioulasso detention center, the arrested CEOs were given their first court notifications. Over 120 charges were listed per executive. The documents outlined tax evasion on a national scale, use of child labor in underground shafts, illegal transfer of gold to Dubai, Canada, and Switzerland, environmental destruction of rivers and forests, bribery and political manipulation. Inside the holding cells, Victor Petrov refused food. Jean-Claude Dubois demanded to speak to his embassy. Michael Thompson claimed he had diplomatic immunity. Traoré's reply, "You had immunity from truth, but not from justice." And then, for the first time in Africa's modern mining history, a closed-door industry would face an open court reckoning. The photo of Ibrahim Traoré standing beside the barefoot girl traveled faster than any press release. By midnight, it had been reprinted in over 300 African newspapers. By morning, it had gone viral across social media platforms, captioned with the phrase that echoed like a rallying cry for her future. But as the world debated whether Burkina Faso's bold move was bravery or madness, Traoré wasn't interested in applause. He was walking through the Ministry of Justice's basement toward a locked vault behind 2 steel doors. Inside was room 14A, the evidence room. Stacks of files filled the space. Each box had a name. Each name had a trail. Goldmax, Western Gold, Pacific Resources. Every forged invoice, every fake worker list, every satellite image was there. Traoré picked up a thin folder labeled Internal Memos, Goldmax. He flipped it open. "Let them protest," one executive had written. "We've paid their leaders." Another read, "Mining site number 7 reports respiratory cases. Good, locals will leave voluntarily." And one more dated just 4 months before the arrests. "Limit water waste cleanup. Cancer rates irrelevant. No press nearby." Traoré handed the folder to his Minister of Justice. "I want every sentence authenticated," he said. "We go to court with the truth, not vengeance." Outside, the world was heating up. The French president, in a televised statement, warned Traoré, "Your behavior is destabilizing to the region. Our companies have rights." The US State Department followed. "If Burkina Faso continues down this authoritarian path, economic aid will be suspended." Traoré stood before cameras and smiled for the first time since the operation began. "We do not eat aid," he said. "We eat what is under our soil, and finally we will eat it ourselves." As court preparations began, hundreds of testimonies poured in from across the nation. Mine workers, evicted farmers, widows, mothers, survivors. Among them was Moussa Ouagadougou, a 24-year-old who had worked in the Topco shaft since the age of 11. He had never attended school. His lungs were damaged. His younger brother had died underground after a tunnel collapse. Moussa stepped into the witness room and whispered, "If I speak, will I be safe?" A court official answered gently, "This time, Moussa, yes." In courtroom. Filing boxes were 27 satellite photos, each showing discrepancies between declared production zones and actual excavation scars. One series, from mining site number 4, showed a hidden tunnel network leading away from the main facility, directly to an unofficial landing strip in the forest. That airstrip had never been on any corporate disclosure. Traoré's investigators traced 75 unregistered gold shipments through it in the past 3 years, most flown to Gulf nations and European warehouses. The corruption went deeper. One document revealed that in 2016, Western Gold Mining paid a $100 million bribe to a regional governor in exchange for exclusive rights to operate on indigenous lands. The deal led to the displacement of 38 villages. Woman named Mariam Coulibaly, 63 years old, testified that soldiers arrived with bulldozers at 2 a.m. "We woke up to screaming. They crushed our homes while we begged," she said. "My grandson was still inside. He was 3. She broke down in tears. So did the judge. Traoré knew this case couldn't rely on emotional testimony alone. He had commissioned a digital forensics team to recover deleted files from seized laptops. What they found was damning. At Pacific Resources, the CEO's personal assistant had kept a spreadsheet titled Risk versus Profit, Illegal Routes. It included formulas calculating how many deaths from cancer would be acceptable losses for continued dumping of chemical waste. The formula read, max loss, year, 1,000. PR impact, low. Legal exposure, 0. No local media access. It was printed, signed and stored in court evidence box for 87. As preparations for trial intensified, the CEOs tried every tactic. Victor Petrov requested diplomatic immunity. Jean-Claude Dubois offered a $1.5 billion settlement in exchange. For release, Michael Thompson claimed he was suffering from a heart condition and could not stand trial. Traoré rejected each move with surgical calm. "They had no mercy when they put our children underground," he told the press. Why should we have mercy now? Still, he took no shortcuts. He assembled a special international tribunal composed of 7 judges, 3 African, 2 Asian, 2 Latin American, no Europeans, no Americans, no possibility of old friends calling in favors. March 27th, the courtroom opened. The world watched. Traoré did not sit hidden behind bulletproof glass. He sat in the gallery, beside mothers of dead miners, beside coughing elders, beside barefoot children. The first witness called Musa. He stood, trembling, but strong. "They stole my childhood," he said. "They paid me with sand. And when my brother was crushed, they called it a cost of doing business." Gasps in the courtroom. The judge nodded solemnly. And then file number 24 was entered into record. It showed Musa's name on the Pacific Resources fake payroll. With a salary listed as $12,000 a month, he had never received more than $50. Outside, protesters filled the streets, not in anger, in hope. Villagers marched with signs reading, "Dig for truth, not gold. No more exploitation." We are not cheap labor. In Liberia, Mali and Guinea, similar rallies erupted. The hashtag #Africa is not for sale trended across the continent. And in a quiet office in Nairobi, a Kenyan activist named Ayo wrote, "This is not Burkina Faso's trial. It is Africa's reckoning." Inside the court, new documents kept surfacing. One recovered email from a Goldmax executive said, "Africa's weak. Give them stadiums and watches. They'll let you mine anything." Another, found in the personal notes of a Western Gold VP, simply read, "We don't need to clean up. They'll never catch on." When the prosecutor read these aloud, the silence in the courtroom felt like thunder. Traoré remained still, hands folded. He looked across the courtroom, not at the CEOs, but at the audience behind him. The families, the workers, the elders. The children. His voice was soft when he spoke. "Now you know what they really think of us. If you were sitting in that courtroom hearing what Musa said, what would justice mean to you? Tell us in the comments below. Your voice matters." As the sun set on the courthouse steps that evening, a journalist asked Traoré, "Do you think this will change anything?" He paused, then answered, "If it doesn't change the world, it will change us. And that is enough." The courtyard was still warm from the day's sun, but the air had changed. Traoré stood in silence on the courthouse steps, staring into the faces of the gathered crowd. Old men with weathered hands, mothers cradling photographs of lost sons, journalists holding their breath, children holding signs made from cardboard and chalk. Behind him, the courtroom doors were still swinging. Inside, history had just shifted, and the world had no idea how far the tremors would reach. April 2nd. 10:02 a.m., the special tribunal was called to session, the final day of trial. The moment everyone had waited for. The courtroom was packed, not just with people, but with something more powerful, anticipation. A court clerk opened a thick envelope. The Tribunal of Seven, by unanimous decision, hereby delivers the following verdicts. A hush fell. Even the translators went quiet. Viktor Petrov, CEO, Goldmax Corporation charges, 234 tax evasion, environmental destruction, fraud, forced labor, bribery, guilty on all counts. Sentence, 50 years in prison, 10 billion in damages, all personal. Assets seized, Jean-Claude Dubois, CEO, Western Gold Mining charges, 189 use of child labor, political corruption, fabricated records, guilty, 45 years in prison, $8 billion in damages. Permanent ban from African business activity, Michael Thompson, Executive Pacific Resources charges, 211 toxic waste dumping, falsifying payroll, death by negligence, guilty. Sentence, life imprisonment without parole. Personal wealth to be distributed to victims' families. The room didn't erupt, it didn't need to. The silence was louder than applause. Outside, a roar swept through the capital. Thousands screamed. Thousands wept. Thousands prayed. Justice had arrived. Over the next hour, 4 more executives were convicted, each with similar stories, each sentenced according to the weight of their crimes. And then, the court announced one final decision, a surprise no one saw coming. By order of this court, all personal assets of the convicted shall be auctioned. Proceeds are to be delivered directly to the families of those affected, beginning with those who lost loved ones due to unsafe mining. Conditions, a gasp. Then a moment later, applause, soft at first, then rising like a storm of dignity, finally breaking through. That evening, on national television, Ibrahim Traoré addressed the country. He wore no suit, no uniform, just a traditional brown tunic. His voice was low, steady. Today, we did not simply try 7 men, we put an entire system on trial, a 500-year legacy of extraction, deception, and domination. And today, we ended it. From now on, our land belongs to our people. Our gold will pave our roads, not theirs. Our children will hold books, not pickaxes. Our rivers will carry fish, not poison. Africa is not for sale. The world reacted instantly. Paris. Emergency cabinet meeting. Brussels. Investors pull billions in African holdings. Washington. Diplomatic fallout expected. One anchor declared on CNN. London. Mining stocks plunge overnight. Goldmax loses 68% of its value in 12 hours. Zurich. Swiss banks begin freezing accounts tied to African minerals, but in Ouagadougou, the reaction was different. Children were dancing in the streets. Women held each other and cried. Churches and mosques alike rang bells of celebration. In a small village near the Ghana border, 78-year-old mine worker Amadou Ouagadougou stood before a crowd. I worked 50 years underground, he said. I saw friends die with nothing but dust in their lungs. But today, I saw a new sun rise over our nation. Today, I feel like a man. But Traoré wasn't done. He signed a presidential decree. Effective immediately, all remaining mining licenses are revoked. All mineral operations shall be placed under the authority of the Burkina Faso National Mining Company, owned by the people. The law earmarked 70% of revenue for South, education, healthcare, clean water, infrastructure, scientific research. He appointed a board of scientists, teachers, and former miners, not politicians, to oversee the company. Within weeks, the change became visible. Construction of 200 schools began in the most neglected mining towns. Rural hospitals opened, fully stocked and staffed. Clean water wells appeared where children once drank from cyanide-tainted streams. The national budget grew by 300% in 1 quarter. School enrollment jumped by 72%. child labor dropped to zero in the mining sector, and something else happened, and something no spreadsheet could capture. Dignity returned. In homes that once echoed with sorrow, laughter returned. Children once coughing dust now ran barefoot through grass. Old men who once begged for medicine now received it, free of charge. The country was breathing again. If you could speak to the mother of a child who died in those mines, what would you say? What should the world learn from this moment? Tell us in the comments. Your words matter. Meanwhile, panic spread through other nations. In Mali, 5 mining CEOs were detained within days. In Guinea, bauxite extraction contracts were suspended. In Niger, uranium mines were nationalized. The continent was waking up. Leaders who once bowed in silence now stood up, and they pointed to one man as their example, Ibrahim Traoré. Western leaders, desperate to regain control, launched counter-campaigns. The French president warned, "Burkina Faso will pay the price for this hostility," to which Traoré replied, "We are not hostile. We are just no longer asleep, and we are no longer yours." The US threatened sanctions. Traoré responded with numbers. "You gave us $100 million in aid. We earned $12 billion this quarter alone from our own soil. Keep your aid. We have our future." In Switzerland, an executive from a now-defunct mining firm was asked, "How did you lose Africa?" He answered bitterly, "We didn't lose it. They took it back." And on a quiet night, under a starlit sky, in the village where the first mine was ever drilled, a statue was raised. It showed a young child with a book in one hand and a gold nugget in the other. Beneath it were 4 words. "This time, we chose." The statue of the child holding a book and a gold nugget became more than a sculpture. It became a symbol of what had been stolen and what had finally been reclaimed. From the plateaus of Burkina Faso to the markets of Nairobi, from Accra to Kinshasa, one phrase began to echo through megaphones, mouths, and hearts. Africa is not for sale. In the weeks that followed the tribunal's final ruling, the dismantling of foreign mining empires began, not in chaos, but in deliberate, focused justice. The Burkina Faso National Mining Company, BFNMC, established offices in every former mining zone. Local community boards were elected to represent their region's interest. Transparency portals were launched. Every ounce of gold, every dollar of revenue, every expenditure. Public Traoré's team called it the sunlight budget, because gold shouldn't hide in the dark, he said. It should shine where everyone can see. And shine it did. By the end of the first fiscal year, national revenue tripled over. 500 new schools were built, 100 rural hospitals were opened. Electricity reached more than 2,000 previously unpowered villages. Safe drinking water was provided to over 3 million people. Roads cut through forests and mountains, connecting regions for the first time. But it wasn't just about numbers, it was about lives. At the Topco mine, where children once coughed blood, there now stood a technical university, fully funded by mining profits. More than 10,000 students were enrolled, training to become engineers, geologists, chemists, and environmental scientists. One of them, Awa Traoré, 19, said, "My father died in that mine. I will rebuild it as a lab, for research, not extraction." Meanwhile, back in the capital, the once untouchable CEOs sat in prison cells, stripped of their titles, wealth, and illusions of power. Victor Petrov, once listed on Forbes, now cleaned the prison floors. Jean-Claude Dubois, who once traveled by private jet, now stood in line for rice and soap. Michael Thompson spent his days writing letters that no one answered. Their companies collapsed, one by one. Gold Max was sold for scrap. Western Gold was bought by an African cooperative. Pacific Resources was dissolved to pay reparations. Their yachts were auctioned, their villas repossessed, their bank accounts misseized and redirected to a victims fund that had already distributed over $3 billion to families across West Africa. And the movement spread. In Kenya, coal extraction contracts were frozen. In Democratic Republic of Congo, an oil deal with a European firm was cancelled. In South Africa, workers demanded equity ownership in every foreign-run mine. The African Union passed a resolution named after the man who started it all, the Traoré Principle. Any natural resource extracted from African land must serve African people first. The Western press tried to spin it. They called him a populist, a disruptor, a radical. But the reality was clearer than ever. Burkina Faso's economy was booming. Unemployment had dropped to record lows. Children once trapped in shafts now played football under solar-powered lights. And in every village, there was a new word for Ibrahim, Traoré Zanga. It means the one who woke us up. Comment prompt: if you could sit down with Traoré for just 1 minute, what would you say to him? What would you ask? Your words matter. Share them below. On the first anniversary of the arrests, a crowd gathered in Ouagadougou for a public ceremony. Traoré stepped onto the stage. He was thinner, more tired, but still fierce. In his hand, a folded paper. He looked at the crowd, at the farmers, students, mothers, children, and said, 1 year ago, they told us we were too poor, too weak, too small. Today, they say, we are dangerous, but the truth is simple. We are awake now, and we are not going back to sleep. He unfolded the paper. It was a letter, handwritten by a 12-year-old girl from the north. Dear President, it read, thank you for my school. Thank you for the clean water. My brother died in a mine, but my little sister will grow up to be a doctor. Please don't. Stop, we need you. Traoré's voice cracked. He looked up and said, I won't stop and neither will you, because this fight isn't mine anymore, it's ours.